just like the previous sessions, it is kind of a book study, so I want to make sure that you do have your book with you. We're going to be using them today. We're going to have some time to discuss a new chapter, chapter 4. There's going to be some breakout sessions. The first one where you will get to share some things that you tried since the last session. We're going to discuss chapter 4, and then at the end you'll have some time to plan and prepare an upcoming lesson. So that's how our session's going to go today. Here's our objectives for today. We will share a scaffolding technique or strategy that we've used since the last session. We will discuss the importance of oral language development, and we will examine recommendations on how to help ELs be more successful when participating in classroom conversations, and then have a chance to plan academic conversations for a future lesson. During the first 2 sessions, we talked a lot about promoting the assets that English learners bring to our classroom. So an EL colleague of mine shared this with me. I thought I would start with this. I have this printed out and put it in my room as just a way to encourage and to really show our students how cool it is to be bilingual. So you can look at some of those stats later. The link is on the bottom if you wanted to print it, but we're going to keep really trying to showcase how awesome it is to speak different languages. All right. The first thing that we're going to do, I think Cayman is going to put us into some breakout rooms, and your job is in your small group is going to be to share one strategy that you used since our last session. Was it impactful? How? And then if you didn't have a chance to try something, what was something that maybe you are planning to try or that you hope to do? I think we're going to take maybe about 7 or 8 minutes, give everybody, if we're in groups of 4, everybody a minute or 2 to share. All right. I hope that you got a chance to hear an activity that was helpful. All right, we're going to move into chapter 4. The focus for chapter 4 is going to be on academic conversations, like we talked about, a tool for fostering EL's oral language development. And you are going to need your book, so if you want to go ahead and get that out. Oral language is the foundation of literacy learning, reading and writing. The first part of the book talked about why that was so important. Oral discussions provide meaningful opportunities for ELs to hear and practice vocabulary. And then academic discussions are a powerful way for ELs to learn and to remember content. So those are all things we want for our students, right? We want them to learn lots of vocabulary and to have multiple chances to learn and remember the content standards that we are trying for them. All right. Okay, back. Challenges to oral language development. The first one is time, right? Everywhere in education, teachers are feeling more and more of the pressure to cover as much as we can, cover all of the standards, and it's just a constant stress for teachers. Another challenge is that ELs don't know or understand their expected role, and that at times ELs don't feel confident in using the level of language required for the task. All right, so I'm not extending the school day, but hopefully within the next hour or so, you'll have some concrete strategies and ways that you can help address those bottom 2 challenges, helping ELs understand their role and helping them feel more confident with the language that is needed. All right, we are going to look in your book on page 87. There is a area with Mrs. Michael. So if you wouldn't mind to turn to page 87, I'm going to give you a second to read. It's just one paragraph at the bottom of that page. And I'm going to ask you to think about those 2 questions. What might Mrs. Michael have done to better have prepared her ELs to participate in that discussion? And then the second one is, are there any recommendations that you might make for her on how to improve the oral task that she presented? You can type your answers in the chat, or we've been, this is our 3rd session. If someone wanted to unmute and answer out loud, that would be fine too, but I'm going to give you a second to read that. that scenario and think about those two questions.
So we have a comment. She could have given them a word bank or sentence starters.
She also could have turned up the subtitles of the video. Read along as they.
That was a little hard to hear, but thank you for being brave and talking.
There's a comment that she could have modeled what an academic conversation sounds like.
I also think that under the modeling, she could have modeled what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you. Those are all great suggestions.
We're
Peers
back.
Instead of an entire group. Thank you.
We're back to the echo.
Possibly role play. I like that. Thanks. So I'm seeing some of the same scaffolding that we talked about in the previous session, giving frames, role playing, having a chance to rehearse, maybe given some written notes or a chance to take notes. Is there anything about the task itself? Does anyone have any thoughts on that task? I think the task was just share one way that Native Americans helped colonists. Okay. One said notes or anchor chart modeling. The task itself was really pretty basic, right? A very low level, a low level task, right? That maybe the video had 3 or 4 ways they helped them, and all you had to do was say that. There was no chance to really support an idea or to make a claim or to give an opinion. So that might be something that we continue to think about. The tasks that we pose, as well as those supports that you can give. All right. So if you look on page 88, the author offers 3 recommendations for supporting oral language development within these classroom talk activities. The first one was to adapt activities to include authentic talk. And someone had put some of that in the chat, which is beautiful. Real, sincere, purposeful dialogue, right? Not just where there's one right answer and the teacher already knows that answer anyway, or many of the kids in the class already know the answer. We want to think about giving opinions or evaluating the ideas of others. Number 2 said to use activities that develop meaningful and robust language. Later in the chapter, there'll be several ideas and suggestions on how you can do that, but if we're spending the classroom time asking students to engage in this academic conversation, we want students to hear and use that content vocabulary or the target vocabulary for that lesson. Another benefit of these conversations is that students get to hear something explained in more than one way. So the teacher might say it one way. If you're in a small group, you might hear a peer say it a different way. So that multiple exposures to the same vocabulary is really important. The number 3 suggestion was to use open-ended discussion prompts. And I think that kind of goes back to number 1, but prompts that support evaluation, not just simply identifying or recalling one small piece of information. This also helps with creating more interest and participation from not just your English learners, but all students, right? Something that that they're excited to share their opinion about or to support, to clarify those ideas. All right, so how do we do that? The next bit of the chapter, pages 90 to 100, outline 4 key practices for helping English learners in these academic conversations. So what we're going to do in our next breakout, you're going to have the opportunity to read and discuss these 4 practices with your group. We're going to use a strategy called Save the Last Word for Me. So you'll have a few minutes to read and then underline 4 or 5 sentences that resonate with you, maybe because you've tried this in your teaching setting, or maybe it's something that you want to try. Maybe you just think, wow, this is something that all kids need, or I know a student this will be helpful for, right? So you're going to underline, out of those 10 pages, you're going to underline 4 or 5 sentences that really resonate with you. Then in your group, one person is going to read aloud one of the sentences that they underlined, but don't say anything about it. Then the other people in your group are going to respond to that sentence. You can probably tell them what page it's on. And then after everyone has responded, the first person gets to explain why he or she chose that sentence. And then it'll go to the next person who reads one of his or her sentences, and then everyone else says something about it. And then the original person who shared that idea gets to say why they shared it. So this one's going to be a little bit longer. And so I think we're ready for our next breakout room.
Alrighty, I'm going to push them into groups.
All right, thanks so much. I hope that you were able to interact a little bit with the strategies presented in that part of the chapter. I've got an infographic up on the screen now. Hopefully you can see it. That includes those 4 practices. Number 1 was come to the discussion prepared. So just like in the scenario we talked about, maybe having some time to pre-teach vocabulary, offering sufficient thinking and writing time before an oral conversation or an academic conversation in your classroom, and then providing scaffolds like graphic organizers or notes. Number 2 was use appropriate body language. I found a lot of that really interesting, and we talked a little bit about that in our session on culture, but and number 2, be open about the cultural norms and how body language is related to someone's culture. So there are going to be differences, and we need to be explicit and really teach our English learners how to interact in a conversation. A lot of people mention modeling, role playing, and those appropriate conversational moves like agreeing, disagreeing. Number 3 said participate by taking turns. I'm sure you read a little bit about that. Making sure that all students in a group have a chance to share their ideas and their thinking. I think the book mentioned a couple ideas like using a talking stick or a rock or something like that, which can be helpful. I've also had students in a small group use chips. So if you give everybody 4 chips, when you're having a discussion, when you want to speak or share an idea, you give a chip. And if they're on the table, everybody can see who needs to participate and maybe who's been talking too much. So it's a nice visual that will help with that taking turns. And then number 4 was make connections. So we want to be, again, explicitly model and show students how to connect ideas in conversations, how to get them to ask when they need clarification, how to agree and disagree and add on to someone else's thinking. So hopefully you found that part of the chapter helpful. All right, and now before you get a little bit of work time, we're going to go through a few resources. The chapter does include some activities that you can use to foster that academic conversations and to get students up and talking. They're on page 103 to 107. I really like, if you're going to pick and choose when you have work time, read on page 106. There's one called Action Thermometer. I really like that one. It's really fun to do because students are up and moving around, and you kind of give an edgy topic, and students either are hot, cold, or in the middle. So that's a fun one to look at when you're doing your planning. And then there are some other resources that I'm going to show you that you can use. This one was made off Boardmaker. If you are, I don't have access to it, but the special education teachers in your buildings probably do. So this one just has pictures that show how we're going to have a conversation and what we're going to do. So things like this will be really helpful to explicitly show and teach your students how to behave during those, how to interact with people in conversation. This was in the chapter. It's figure 4.5. I thought it was a nice idea with older students. how did it go after you had a conversation? What things did you do? Giving them a second to reflect on how they participated, and then maybe even set a goal for the next discussion. That was nice. You can look through those. And I did put the slides in the chat again, so when you have your work time, you can open them up. Hopefully you can see them all. The first link on this slide is to this document that's called Conversation Bingo. And I created this one using the sentence frames that are on the top of page 100. So this is a fun thing to do with whatever you're talking about, or you could have it in your classroom and keep it out all week, where if you hear someone or you use one of those sentence stems, you put a stamp on it or you put a star on it, and then you try to get 4 in a row. See who can do that. And then that next link where it says planning oral language activities, I've listed what's there. So later on, you could open this and print them, some things that are ready to go. That 4.5 that I just showed you, it's got 2 on a page, so you could print that, so you're ready to go with that one. And some other figures from the chapter that are helpful for planning these academic conversations, and that other graphic. This one, I hope you can see it, was created last year. A teacher at my school, for kind of a different reason, but very similar. So we have a student who's been in our school for 3 or 4 years, and her English is actually very good. She's just very reluctant to talk. So her teacher created this bingo board just for her. So you can see on there, it has things like compliment a student during the class meeting. One of them I'm on there, go ask Miss Dawson a question, or compliment a friend, share how you learned something. So you could tailor this idea for an individual student that you just want to get talking more. I think that she earned lunch bunch. When she filled up her bingo board, she got to go have lunch in the classroom. And it was really helpful. She was just, really reluctant to use her English that she had. So that might be something fun. You could take a minute and try to create your own bingo board for a particular student when we have some of that time. And then as you read this chapter, I am guessing that you saw this name a lot, Jeff Swears. We got to hear him speak at the KYCEL. I don't know if anybody else did, but he was phenomenal. And he's got a whole book on this topic that's fabulous and wonderful. So it's called Next Steps with Academic Conversations. I photocopied the contents because I think it would be a great book. If this is a topic that you are really interested in, this would be a great book to get. You can kind of see that. And then from the first chapter in this book, we talked about designing prompts or open-ended questions that really have higher level thinking. Well, this document has thinking skills broken out by content level. So there are social studies and history, language arts, and science. So I thought that might be really helpful. Whatever your content area is, or whatever lesson you're going to think about planning, you might look here to think about how to create a prompt that is really going to be engaging, that is going to, stimulate conversation that is, more interesting and really higher, deeper level thinking. So that is there. And then last, this is also in the other document that I shared, but this is a checklist for planning an oral language activity with your class. So let's see what time it is. Oh, yeah, so we're not going to have a ton of time. We'll probably take maybe 10 or 12 minutes where you will have some time to look through these resources. You can, I think they're going to go back to your groups, but you can do it on your computer on your own. If you have an idea you want to share, that's fine. You feel free to talk to people in your group, but you'll have some time to think about what you're going to teach next week or next month, and think about how you might use a couple of these resources. I hope that you can open all of the resources. So if that's not the case, you can let me know, and we will share those again. All right, so I think we're ready to have a little bit of work time, and then we will come back for that and wrap up. As you're coming back in, if you want to look up at the quote that I have, this is from that Jeff Swears book on academic conversations. I'm going to read it, and then we'll get ready for our feedback form and closing out for today. I hope you were able to use a little bit of time to pick an idea or a strategy to use. So he says, conversations tend to be diverse, incomplete, and messy. They are all different, and they are a lot of mental work. It would be much easier for us and for our students to simply memorize definitions, short answers, facts, and grammar rules than to build complex ideas in constructive conversations. Despite the challenges, though, we know that having academic conversation is necessary for students' academic development. And I'm going to add their language development, right? By valuing conversations between people, we are shaping our students' views of how we learn and live. When they see the value of learning by talking with others, building up ideas, and making decisions, their views of learning are amplified. This process does, however, take a lot of work and practice. And the remaining chapters of this book are here to help. So go buy his book. It's a really good one. But I like that he's giving us a little bit of grace there too, right? This is a hard, messy process and not something that you're going to totally reinvent in one day. I hope that, like I said, that you could at least get one strategy that you will use to help your EL friends in your classrooms and help them grow their language through talking at school. So we'll look back at those objectives for today if you can see them. So hopefully we were able to share a strategy, talk a little bit about oral language development, and then look at those recommendations. I think that Skip or Cayman are going to put the feedback form in the chat. So if you wouldn't mind to take a few seconds or a minute or two to fill that out. While you do that, I was going to share this photo. In my first breakout room, we were talking about the big rise of students that we've had since Christmas break. This is one of my new friends. He's been here, I don't know, 8 days. And on his second day, he's in kindergarten. And we found out that he has not been in school. He had like 3 days of school. So this is basically like his first school experience, first week of kindergarten. He spent most of the first day crying. The second day, a little bit better, but by 9:30, he was still asking for the bus. And I was using my phone a lot to translate. And as I'm walking him out to the bus, he was actually pretty happy. He kept saying something, please, and pointing to my phone. And so I thought maybe he wants to talk to the translator, maybe he needs to go to the bathroom. You know, I was really nervous putting him on the bus. And finally, I understand that he is trying to say selfie, please. So he knows like 20 words in English. One of them is selfie. And so, of course, we stopped right there and we took a selfie. And that's a pretty big smile for him, actually. So I don't know. I just thought it was so precious. And, you know, our kids were coming with those digital skills in any language. So selfies are the new universal language. And he's doing well now. His week 2 now, and he's very he's much more adjusted, having a good time. And I think last week he said I love you 100. So, you know, we've made some big gains in 8 days. Thank you so much for your time today. I do hope you stay warm. I'm sorry again for the technical difficulties. And then as a reminder, if you called in from your phone, please make sure you put your name in the chat so that Brandy and Cayman can send you an email with the feedback form, because the phone does not identify who you are. So if you want to get your credit and able to fill out that feedback form, please put your name in the chat. I also wanted to say that for our next session, we are skipping over chapter 5 because there's a lot of chapters in the book. We don't have enough sessions to get through all of them. So we are skipping chapter 5. So for next session, please read chapter 6. And we're going to spend some time talking about vocabulary instruction for ELs. And that is going to be on Thursday, February 15th. Again, they're all at 4:30 Eastern time. And then there will be 2 more after that. Thank you so much for your time. If you want to unmute, if there are any other questions, I'm happy to stay on with anyone who has a question, or if you want to talk some more. Not, we'll hope to see you in February. after you've eaten all that Valentine's candy. Lots of love.